His throne, her war. Bianca Bellini had been a mafia wife for 10 years, her husband's perfect ornament, his silent queen. But when he was assassinated and the world turned its eyes on her, she realized something dangerous. She was more powerful without him. The men in the room waited to see what she would do, waited to see if she would fold. But here husband's most trusted advisor, a man with silver eyes and a quiet promise of violence, just tilted his head. "Tell me, Bella mia," he murmured. "Do you plan to grieve him or replace him?" Chapter 1. The Scent of Gunpowder and Lilies. The air in the grand cathedral hung thick and heavy, a suffocating blend of incense, the cloying sweetness of lilies, and the faint, metallic tang of gunpowder. Bianca Bellini knelt before the ornate coffin, her black veil a sheer curtain between her and the judging eyes of the mourners. Her husband, Marco Bellini, Don of the Bellini family, lay within, his still face a mask of waxy serenity that belied the violence of his end. A single bullet, clean and precise, had ended his reign just days before. Bianca's fingers, adorned with the heavy Bellini family ring, a coiled serpent biting its own tail, traced the cool, polished wood. 10 years. 10 years she had been his wife, his ornament, as he'd so often reminded her. A beautiful, silent queen to adorn his arm, to grace his table, to bear him an heir that never came. The thought pricked at her, a familiar ache of failure in a life meticulously crafted for perfection. She hadn't loved Marco, not in the way women in novels love their husbands. But she had respected him, feared him, even admired his ruthless efficiency. He had built an empire on blood and loyalty, and she had been his most prized possession within it. Now, the empire was hers, a terrifying inheritance she hadn't asked for and wasn't sure she wanted. The priest's droning voice washed over her, a Latin litany that offered little comfort. Bianca's gaze drifted from the coffin to the faces in the pews. Her in-laws, the Bellini clan, were a tapestry of grief and suspicion. Marco's brothers, Antonio and Lorenzo, stood stiff and unyielding, their faces etched with a barely concealed hunger for power. Their wives, adorned in their own veils of mourning, watched Bianca with a chilling blend of pity and calculation. Further back, the soldati, the family soldiers, stood like grim sentinels, their faces impassive, their loyalty a commodity to be bought and sold. They were the muscle, the enforcers of Marco's will, and now they were waiting for her to crumble, to falter, to show any sign of weakness that would allow them to seize control. But it was the man standing just behind her, slightly to the left, who held her attention captive.
Alessandro Rossi.
Marco's consigliere, his most trusted advisor, the shadow that had always moved silently at his side. He was tall, with a lean, wiry strength that radiated a quiet, contained power. His hair was dark, streaked with silver at the temples, a testament to years spent navigating the treacherous currents of the underworld. And his eyes were the color of polished silver, cold and unreadable, yet somehow knowing. He hadn't spoken a word to her since Marco's death, not directly. But she felt his presence like a weight on her shoulders, a silent question hanging in the air. He had been Marco's right hand, the keeper of his secrets, the architect of his strategies. And now he was watching her. The service ended, and the heavy coffin was carried out, followed by the slow, mournful procession of mourners. Bianca rose, her knees stiff from kneeling, and Alessandro moved closer, his presence a subtle shield against the pressing crowd. He didn't touch her, but she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, the faint scent of his cologne a blend of sandalwood and something darker, something that hinted at danger filling her senses. Outside, the Roman sky was a bruised purple, the air heavy with a threat of rain. The funeral procession wound its way through the narrow, cobbled streets, past ancient buildings that had witnessed centuries of secrets and betrayals. Bianca walked with her head held high, her spine rigid, refusing to let the tears that threatened to spill betray her inner turmoil. They reached the Bellini family mausoleum, a grand, imposing structure of marble and granite, a testament to the family's power and legacy. As Marco's coffin was lowered into the cold earth, a single sob escaped Bianca's lips, quickly stifled. She felt a hand brush lightly against her back, a fleeting touch of reassurance, and she knew, without looking, that it was Alessandro. Back at the Bellini Palazzo, a sprawling villa overlooking the city, the atmosphere was even more stifling than the cathedral. The grand dining room, usually filled with the sounds of laughter and boisterous conversation, was now hushed, the air thick with unspoken tensions. The long, mahogany table was laden with food platters of antipasto, bowls of pasta, roasted meats, but no one seemed to have much of an appetite. Bianca sat at the head of the table, Marco's customary seat, feeling the weight of his absence, like a physical blow. Antonio and Lorenzo sat on either side of her, their presence a constant reminder of the power struggle that was about to unfold. Alessandro stood behind her chair, his silent presence a subtle warning to anyone who dared to challenge her. The meal was a strained affair, punctuated by awkward silences and veiled threats. Antonio, the elder of the two brothers, was the first to break the uneasy truce. "Bianca," he said, his voice low and gravelly, "we need to discuss the future of the family." Bianca met his gaze, her own eyes steady and unwavering. "The future of the family will be discussed when I am ready to discuss it," she replied, her voice surprisingly firm. Lorenzo, the younger and more volatile brother, slammed his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. "You think you can just step into Marco's shoes?" he snarled. "You, a woman who couldn't even give him a son?" Bianca's hand tightened around her fork, but she refused to rise to his bait. "I am Marco's widow," she said, her voice cold and even. "And according to his will, I am now the head of this family." The words hung in the air, a challenge, a declaration of war. The room fell silent, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Alessandro shifted slightly, his hand moving subtly towards the inside of his jacket, where Bianca knew he kept a beretta. It was then that he spoke, his voice low and smooth, cutting through the tension like a knife. "Tell me, Bella mia," he murmured, his silver eyes fixed on hers, a hint of something that might have been amusement, or perhaps something far more dangerous, flickering within them. "Do you plan to grieve him, or replace him?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. It was a challenge, a test, a subtle invitation to step into a world of power and danger, a world she had always observed from the sidelines. And in that moment, staring into those silver eyes, Bianca realized something profound and terrifying. She was no longer the silent queen. She was the widow, and the throne was hers for the taking. But at what cost? The question echoed in the sudden, sharp intake of her breath, a silent prelude to the storm that was about to break. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Palazzo. The silence that followed Alessandro's question stretched, taut, and vibrating with unspoken tension. Bianca could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, the brothers' hostile scrutiny, the soldati's calculating assessment, and the veiled curiosity of the women. It was Alessandro's eyes, however, that held her captive, a silver mirror reflecting a future she hadn't dared to imagine. She took a slow, deliberate breath, the scent of the untouched food on the table suddenly cloying. "I plan," she said, her voice steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs, "to do what is best for the Bellini family." It was a carefully chosen answer, ambiguous enough to avoid a direct confrontation, yet firm enough to assert her authority. Antonio snorted, a sound of derision that echoed in the vast room. "And what do you know of what's best for the family, Bianca? You've spent the last 10 years arranging flowers and choosing china patterns." Bianca's jaw tightened, but she refused to be drawn into his petty provocations. She had learned patience, learned to observe, learned to read the subtle cues of power and deception. She had learned from the best, after all. She had learned from Marco. "I know more than you think, Antonio," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "And I have the will of my husband to guide me." Lorenzo leaned forward, his dark eyes flashing with anger. "A will that was likely written under duress. You probably manipulated him into it. Just like you manipulated him until he stopped abruptly, his gaze flickering towards Alessandro, who remained a silent, watchful presence behind Bianca's chair. The insinuation was clear, and a wave of heat flushed Bianca's cheeks. The rumors had circulated for years, whispers in the shadows about the beautiful, barren wife and the fiercely loyal consigliere. They were baseless, of course. Alessandro had always been respectful, distant, even protective. But in the viper's nest of the Bellini family, even the most innocent gesture could be twisted into something sinister. Alessandro finally moved, stepping forward slightly, his presence filling the space between Bianca and her brothers-in-law. "Lorenzo," he said, his voice dangerously soft, "you will watch your tongue. You are speaking to the Dawn now." The word, Dawn, hung in the air, a title that still felt foreign, almost blasphemous, on Bianca's lips. But Alessandro's use of it, his subtle emphasis, was a clear declaration of his allegiance. He was choosing her side, for now at least. Lorenzo, despite his bluster, flinched under Alessandro's gaze. He knew, as everyone in the room knew, that Alessandro's loyalty was not to be trifled with. He had been Marco's most trusted advisor, his enforcer, the man who carried out his darkest orders. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. The tension eased slightly, but the underlying current of hostility remained. Bianca knew that this was just the beginning. She had won a small battle, but the war for control of the Bellini family was far from over. After the disastrous dinner, Bianca retreated to her private suite, a lavishly decorated space that had always felt more like a gilded cage than a sanctuary. She dismissed her maid, wanting to be alone with her thoughts. She walked to the balcony, overlooking the sprawling gardens and the twinkling lights of Rome beyond. The night air was cool against her skin, a welcome relief from the stifling atmosphere of the palazzo. She leaned against the railing, her gaze fixed on the distant cityscape, her mind racing. She had to be strong, she had to be ruthless, she had to be Marco. But could she? Could she truly step into his shoes, wield his power, command his respect? A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts.
Alessandro.
She hadn't expected him to seek her out so soon. She hesitated for a moment, then composed herself and called out, "Come in." He entered the room, his movements silent and graceful, like a predator stalking its prey. He closed the door behind him, the soft click echoing in the stillness. He stood there for a moment, his silver eyes studying her, assessing her. "You handled them well," he said finally, his voice low and intimate, as if they were the only two people in the world. Bianca gave a wry smile. "I bought myself some time, nothing more." "Time is a valuable commodity," he replied, moving closer. He stopped a few feet away, respecting her space, but his presence filled the room, making it feel smaller, more intimate. "What happens now, Alessandro?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He tilted his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Now, Bella Mia, we begin." He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending a shiver through her. He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. It was a gesture of respect, of loyalty, and something more. Something that sent a flutter of something unfamiliar, something dangerous, through her veins. He held onto her hand, and with his other, reached to the heavy Bellini ring on her finger, turning it slowly. He stared at the serpent biting its own tail. "This," he began, his voice a low thrum, "is a symbol of unending power, of cycles, of death and rebirth." Marco wore it as a symbol of fear. "What will it mean for you, Bianca?" She stared at the ring, then back into his eyes. The weight of it, the weight of everything, felt almost unbearable. She had a choice to make, and she knew, with a sudden, chilling clarity, that her decision would determine not only her own fate, but the fate of the entire Bellini empire. The choice of how to rule and who to rule with. It was a choice, she suddenly realized, that had been presented the very moment Marco drew his last breath. But was she ready? Was she strong enough to embrace the darkness, or would she be consumed by it? Chapter 3. The Weight of the Ring. Alessandro's gaze lingered on the ring, his thumb tracing the intricate carvings of the serpent. The silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the distant sounds of the city. Bianca felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years, not since the early days of her marriage to Marco, when she was still a naive girl, unsure of her place in his world. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what it will mean for me. I only know that I can't. I won't be a puppet, like they expect me to be." Alessandro's lips curved into a faint smile, a hint of admiration flickering in his silver eyes. "No," he said, his voice low and resonant. "You are not a puppet, Bianca. You are a Bellini." The way he said her name, with a subtle emphasis, a hint of possessiveness, sent a shiver down her spine. It was a reminder of her lineage, of the power that flowed through her veins, a power she had always kept hidden, suppressed, fearing its potential. He released her hand, but the warmth of his touch lingered on her skin. He stepped back slightly, giving her space, but his presence still dominated the room. "Marco left you more than just a title, Bianca," he said, his gaze sweeping over the opulent suite. "He left you an empire. But empires are not built on sentimentality. They are built on strength, on ruthlessness, on the ability to make difficult choices." Bianca nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She knew he was right. She had seen Marco make those difficult choices, had witnessed the consequences, the blood that had been spilled to maintain their power. She had always turned away, unable to stomach the brutality, but now she had no choice but to face it. "I understand," she said, her voice stronger now, fueled by a growing sense of determination. "But I also believe that there is another way. A way to rule with strength, but also with compassion." Alessandro raised an eyebrow, a flicker of skepticism in his eyes. "Compassion is a luxury we cannot afford, Bianca. In this world, it is seen as a weakness." "Perhaps," she conceded, "but I believe it can also be a strength. A way to earn loyalty, not just demand it." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze intense and unwavering. "You surprise me, Bianca," he said finally. "You are not the woman I thought you were." "And what woman did you think I was?" she asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. He smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that sent a flutter of something that felt dangerously close to excitement through her. "I thought you were a delicate flower, a beautiful ornament to be admired, but not touched. I thought you were content to live in the shadows, to let others make the decisions. I was wrong." His words were both a compliment and a warning. He was acknowledging her strength, her potential, but he was also reminding her of the dangers that lay ahead. "I'm not afraid of the shadows, Alessandro," she said, meeting his gaze. "I've lived in them long enough." He stepped closer again, his presence enveloping her. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. The touch was electric, sending a jolt of awareness through her. "Then perhaps," he said, his voice a low whisper, "it is time for you to step into the light. But be warned, Bella mia, the light can be just as blinding, just as dangerous, as the darkness." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "And I will be there," he whispered, "to guide you, to protect you, to make sure you don't lose your way." His words were a promise, a threat, and an invitation all in one. He was offering her his support, his expertise, his loyalty, but at what price? She knew that Alessandro was not a man to be trifled with. He was a master of manipulation, a strategist, a survivor. He had served Marco faithfully for years, and now he was offering to serve her. But could she trust him? Could she trust anyone in this world of shadows and betrayals? She looked into his eyes, searching for answers, for any hint of deception. But his gaze was unreadable, a silver mask that hid his true intentions. And yet, despite her doubts, despite her fears, she found herself drawn to him, drawn to his strength, his confidence, his power. "I need your help, Alessandro," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I can't do this alone." He nodded slightly, the firelight catching the silver in his eyes. "I know you can't, Bianca. That's why I am here." He held her gaze for a long moment, a promise passing between them. Then, a soft rap at the door broke the spell. One of the house staff, with a message from Antonio. He was demanding a meeting, immediately.
Bianca sighed.
The games had already begun. It seems, Alessandro said dryly, your brothers are not willing to wait. He reached out and for a moment, she thought he was going to touch her again. But he merely straightened her collar, a small, intimate gesture that spoke volumes. Then his eyes caught hers. Ready to face the wolves, Bella Mia? The question hung in the air. The weight of the ring on her hand felt heavier than ever before. The weight of expectation, of duty, of the dangerous path that stretched before her. She took a breath, and a newfound steel entered her voice. More than ready. Chapter 4. A Council of Shadows. The meeting room was a stark contrast to the opulent luxury of the rest of the palazzo. It was a subterranean chamber, hidden deep beneath the villa, a place where secrets were shared and deals were struck. The walls were lined with dark wood paneling, the only light source a single, heavy chandelier that cast long, dancing shadows across the faces of the assembled men. Bianca sat at the head of the long, mahogany table, Alessandro standing behind her, a silent sentinel. Antonio and Lorenzo sat opposite her, their faces grim and unyielding. Several other key members of the Bellini family were present, regimes who controlled various aspects of their operations: gambling, protection rackets, smuggling. They were all men, hardened by years of navigating the treacherous world of the mafia, their loyalty a commodity to be bought and sold. The air was thick with tension, the silence punctuated only by the occasional clink of ice in glasses of whiskey. Bianca could feel their eyes on her, assessing her, judging her, waiting for her to falter. She knew that this was a test, a crucial moment in her bid to consolidate her power. Antonio was the first to speak, his voice harsh and grating. "We've indulged your mourning period, Bianca," he said, his gaze sweeping over her dismissively. "But now it's time to get down to business. The family needs a leader, a Don, not a grieving widow." Bianca met his gaze, her own eyes steady and unwavering. "I am the Don," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Marco's will is clear." Lorenzo scoffed. "A piece of paper signed by a dying man? That doesn't make you a leader, Bianca. This is a man's world. You don't belong here." Bianca felt a surge of anger, but she kept her composure. She had expected this resistance, this blatant sexism. She had lived with it her entire life. But she was no longer the meek, submissive wife. She was the head of the Bellini family, and she would not be bullied. "This is my family," she said, her voice rising slightly. "And I will not let you, or anyone else, take it from me." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. They were not used to hearing such defiance from her. Bianca had always been the quiet one, the observer, the one who stayed in the background. They had underestimated her, and that was a mistake she intended to use to her advantage. Alessandro stepped forward, his presence a subtle warning. "The Don has spoken," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And you will all respect her decision." His words hung in the air, a clear challenge to anyone who dared to defy her. Alessandro's reputation preceded him. He was known for his ruthlessness, his efficiency, his unwavering loyalty to Marco. And now, that loyalty was directed towards Bianca. The regimes shifted uneasily in their seats. They were all ambitious men, eager to advance their own positions within the family. But they were also cautious, wary of crossing Alessandro. They knew that he was not a man to be trifled with. Antonio, however, was not so easily intimidated. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. "And what exactly are your plans, Bianca?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "How do you intend to lead this family? Do you even understand our operations?" Bianca took a deep breath, calming her racing heart. "I understand more than you think, Antonio," she said. "I've been watching, listening, learning for 10 years. I know who our allies are, who our enemies are, what our strengths and weaknesses are." She paused, letting her words sink in. "And I have a vision for the future of this family. A vision that will make us stronger, more prosperous, more respected." She outlined her plan, speaking with a confidence and authority that surprised even herself. She proposed modernizing their operations, diversifying their investments, moving away from the more brutal aspects of their business, and focusing on legitimate enterprises. She spoke of building alliances, forging partnerships, creating a new image for the Bellini family. Her words were met with a mixture of skepticism and cautious interest. Some of the older Capo regimes were resistant to change, clinging to the old ways, the old methods. But others, particularly the younger ones, seemed intrigued by her ideas. Lorenzo, predictably, was the most vocal in his opposition. "This is madness," he exclaimed. "You're going to weaken us, make us vulnerable. We need to be feared, not respected." Bianca turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "Fear is fleeting, Lorenzo," she said. "Respect is enduring. And respect is what will ultimately protect us." The debate raged for hours, arguments flying back and forth, alliances shifting and reforming. Bianca held her ground, defending her vision, parrying their attacks, using her knowledge of their individual ambitions and weaknesses to her advantage. Alessandro remained by her side, a silent, watchful presence, offering subtle guidance, intervening only when necessary to reinforce her authority. Finally, as dawn approached, a fragile consensus began to emerge. Bianca had not won them all over, but she had gained enough support to move forward with her plans. Antonio and Lorenzo were still opposed, but they were outnumbered, their influence weakened. As the meeting adjourned, Bianca felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. It had been a grueling ordeal, a baptism by fire. But she had survived. She had faced down her rivals, asserted her authority, and taken the first step towards reshaping the Bellini family in her own image. Alessandro walked with her back to her suite, the palazzo silent and still in the early morning light. "You were magnificent," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. Bianca gave a wry smile. "I was terrified," she admitted. He chuckled softly. "Fear is a powerful motivator, Bella mia. It keeps you sharp, keeps you alive." They reached her door, and he paused, his silver eyes studying her. "You have a long road ahead of you, Bianca," he said. "But you are not alone. I will be with you, every step of the way." He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. "Remember what I told you. The serpent symbolizes rebirth. It sheds its old skin. Tonight you shed yours. The question now is, what form will you take?" The unasked portion of the question hung between them. "And who will you become?" The weight of his words, the weight of the future, settled upon her as she stepped back into her suite, the scent of lilies now a reminder not of death, but of the daunting, exhilarating, and terrifying possibilities that lay ahead. Chapter 5. The Serpent's Kiss. The days following the council meeting were a whirlwind of activity. Bianca immersed herself in the family business, poring over ledgers, meeting with lawyers and accountants, learning the intricate details of their operations. She discovered that Marco had left behind a vast and complex empire, far more extensive than she had ever imagined. There were legitimate businesses, real estate, construction, import-export that served as a front for their more illicit activities, gambling, loan sharking, protection rackets. She also discovered that Marco had been meticulous in his record-keeping, leaving behind a trail of encrypted documents, hidden accounts, and secret deals. It was a daunting task to unravel it all, but Bianca was determined to understand every aspect of her inheritance. Alessandro was her constant companion, her guide through the labyrinthine world of the mafia. He explained the complexities of their operations, introduced her to key figures, and helped her navigate the treacherous politics of the underworld. He was patient, insightful, and surprisingly gentle. She found herself relying on him more and more, not just for his expertise, but for his emotional support. He was the only one who truly understood the pressure she was under, the weight of the responsibilities she carried. He was the only one who treated her as an equal, who saw her not as a grieving widow, but as a powerful woman in her own right. One evening, after a particularly grueling day spent dealing with a rival family's encroachment on their territory, Bianca found herself alone with Alessandro in the palazzo's library. The room was filled with the scent of old books and leather, a comforting aroma that always soothed her. She was sitting at Marco's old desk, a massive piece of furniture that seemed to dwarf her, surrounded by stacks of documents. Alessandro was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. He turned to her, his silver eyes catching the light from the fireplace. "You're pushing yourself too hard, Bianca," he said, his voice filled with concern. "You need to rest." Bianca sighed, running a hand through her tired eyes. "I can't rest, Alessandro," she said. "There's too much to do. Too much at stake." He walked towards her, his movements fluid and graceful. He stopped in front of the desk, his presence filling her field of vision. "You need to take care of yourself, Bellamia," he said, his voice low and intimate. "Or you'll burn out before you even begin." He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. The touch was electric, sending a jolt of awareness through her. She had become accustomed to his touch, to his closeness, but it still had the power to unsettle her, to make her heart race. "I'm fine, Alessandro," she said, her voice trembling slightly. But she knew she wasn't fine. She was exhausted, overwhelmed, and scared. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "Don't lie to me, Bianca," he whispered. "I see the fear in your eyes. I see the doubt." His words were like a knife, cutting through her carefully constructed facade. She had tried to hide her vulnerability, to project an image of strength and confidence, but Alessandro saw through her. He saw the real Bianca, the woman who was struggling to cope with the immense burden she had inherited. Tears welled up in her eyes, tears she had been holding back for weeks. She turned away, ashamed of her weakness, but he gently turned her face back to his. "It's all right to be afraid, Bianca," he said, his voice soft and soothing. "It's all right to be vulnerable. You don't have to be strong all the time." He wiped away her tears with his thumb, his touch gentle and caring. "Let me help you," he said. "Let me share your burden." She looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception, but she saw only sincerity, only concern, and something more, something that made her heart ache with a longing she hadn't felt in years. She nodded, unable to speak, her throat choked with emotion. He leaned in and kissed her, a soft, tentative kiss at first, then deepening, becoming more passionate, more demanding. It was a kiss that spoke of shared burdens, of unspoken desires, of a connection that had been forged in the crucible of danger and loss. It was also, undeniably, a betrayal of Marco's memory, of the vows she had made, of the rules of the world they inhabited. But in that moment, surrounded by the ghosts of the past, she didn't care. She needed this, needed him, needed the comfort and the strength he offered. The kiss ended, leaving her breathless and trembling. Alessandro pulled back slightly, his silver eyes searching hers. Bianca began, but she didn't know what to say. She was overwhelmed by a mix of guilt, desire, and confusion. Alessandro silenced her with a finger to her lips. "Don't," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "Don't say anything. Not yet." He kissed her again, a shorter, softer kiss this time, a seal on a silent pact. He then stepped back, his expression unreadable. "Rest now, Bianca," he said, his voice back to its usual calm, controlled tone. "We have a long day ahead of us tomorrow." He left the room, leaving Bianca alone with her thoughts, her emotions, and the lingering taste of his kiss on her lips. It was a kiss that had changed everything, a kiss that had crossed a line, a kiss that had unleashed a torrent of feelings she had long suppressed. It was the serpent's kiss, a taste of forbidden fruit, a promise of both pleasure and danger. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that there was no turning back. The line was crossed, the choice made. But was it a choice for him, or a choice against everything she had ever known? The question lingered, unanswered, as she finally drifted into a troubled sleep. Chapter 6. Echoes of Betrayal. The morning after the kiss, Bianca awoke with a sense of unease, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. The memory of Alessandro's touch, the taste of his lips, lingered, a potent reminder of the line they had crossed. She felt a mixture of guilt and excitement, a dangerous combination that made her heart race and her palms sweat. She tried to push the thoughts aside, to focus on the day ahead. She had a meeting scheduled with several of her capo regimes to discuss their progress on implementing her new initiatives. She also needed to review the latest financial reports and address a growing dispute with a rival family over a lucrative construction contract. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that the delicate balance of power within the family had been irrevocably altered. The kiss had not only changed her relationship with Alessandro, it also raised questions about her own leadership, her own ability to maintain control. As she dressed, she noticed the Bellini ring on her finger, the coiled serpent glinting in the morning light. It felt heavier than usual, a constant reminder of her responsibilities, of the legacy she had inherited, and of the betrayal she had committed. She met Alessandro in the dining room for breakfast. He was already there, sipping espresso and reading the morning newspaper. He looked up as she entered, his silver eyes meeting hers, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Good morning, Bella mia," he said, his voice low and intimate. Bianca felt a blush creep up her cheeks. She couldn't meet his gaze, feeling a wave of shame and awkwardness wash over her. She sat down opposite him, avoiding his eyes. "Good morning," she mumbled, reaching for a piece of toast. The silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the clinking of silverware and the rustling of the newspaper. Bianca felt a desperate need to break the tension, to address the elephant in the room. "Alessandro," she began, her voice trembling slightly. About last night he raised a hand, silencing her. "We will speak of it later," he said, his voice firm. "When we are alone." He returned to his newspaper, leaving Bianca to stew in her own thoughts. She picked at her food, her appetite gone. She couldn't understand his sudden shift in demeanor. Last night, he had been tender, passionate, vulnerable. This morning, he was distant, almost cold. The meeting with the capo regimes was tense and unproductive. Antonio and Lorenzo were openly hostile, questioning her decisions, undermining her authority. The other capo regimes were hesitant, unsure of where their loyalties should lie. Bianca struggled to maintain control, to assert her leadership, but she felt like she was losing ground. She noticed that Alessandro remained unusually quiet throughout the meeting, offering little support or guidance. He simply observed, his silver eyes watching her, assessing her. His silence was unnerving, making her feel even more isolated and vulnerable. After the meeting, Bianca retreated to her office, feeling defeated and frustrated. She sat at her desk, staring out the window, her mind racing. She had made a mistake, a terrible mistake. She had allowed her emotions to cloud her judgment, and now she was paying the price. She heard a knock on the door, and Alessandro entered. He closed the door behind him, his expression serious. "We need to talk," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. Bianca nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "I know," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He walked towards her, stopping a few feet away. "Last night," he began, his voice low and controlled, "was a mistake. A lapse in judgment. It cannot happen again." Bianca felt a sharp pang of disappointment, a feeling she tried to suppress. She had known, logically, that the kiss was a mistake, that it complicated their already complex relationship. But hearing him say it so bluntly, so coldly, stung. "I understand," she said, her voice flat. "We have a responsibility to this family," he continued, his gaze intense. "We cannot allow personal feelings to interfere with our duty." "I know that," she said, her voice rising slightly. "I'm not a child, Alessandro." He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something that might have been amusement in his eyes. "No," he said, "you are not a child. You are the Dawn. And you need to start acting like it." His words were like a slap in the face. He was right, of course. She had been acting like a lovesick teenager, allowing her emotions to get the better of her. She needed to regain control, to focus on her responsibilities, to prove that she was worthy of the title she held. "You're right," she said, her voice calmer now. "I apologize. It won't happen again." He nodded, his expression softening slightly. "Good," he said. Now, about the meeting, he proceeded to analyze the meeting, pointing out her mistakes, offering suggestions for how to handle the Capo regimes, how to regain their trust and respect. He was sharp, insightful, and brutally honest. As he spoke, Bianca realized that she had been foolish to think that last night had changed anything between them. He was still her consigliere, her advisor, her mentor. And she was still the Don, the leader of the Bellini family. Their personal feelings, whatever they might be, were irrelevant. Or so she told herself. But as she looked into his silver eyes, she couldn't help but wonder if he was truly as unaffected by their kiss as he pretended to be. And she couldn't deny the lingering feeling of disappointment, the echo of betrayal that resonated within her. There was a distance now, a carefully constructed wall. The question was, who had built it higher, him or her? The unspoken answer hung in the air, a chilling reminder of the complexities of their world. Chapter 7. Beneath the Velvet Gloves. The following weeks were a period of intense work and strategic maneuvering. Bianca, heeding Alessandro's advice, adopted a more assertive, more decisive approach. She began to cultivate relationships with the more amenable Capo regimes, offering them incentives, promising them greater autonomy and a share in the family's growing wealth. She also started to subtly undermine Antonio and Lorenzo, exposing their weaknesses, revealing their past mistakes, and isolating them from the rest of the family. She learned to use her femininity to her advantage, playing the part of the grieving widow, the innocent newcomer, while subtly manipulating the men around her. She discovered that she had a talent for reading people, for understanding their motivations, for exploiting their vulnerabilities. She was learning to play the game, to wear the velvet gloves that concealed the iron fist. Alessandro remained her constant advisor, her shadow, her confidant. He was always there, watching, listening, offering his counsel. He taught her the intricacies of the mafia world, the unwritten rules, the codes of honor and betrayal. He showed her how to identify her enemies, how to anticipate their moves, how to strike before they could strike her. But their relationship remained strictly professional. The kiss, the moment of intimacy they had shared, was never mentioned again. It was as if it had never happened. And yet, it hung in the air between them, an unspoken tension, a secret that both of them were aware of. Bianca found herself increasingly drawn to Alessandro, despite her efforts to maintain a professional distance. She admired his intelligence, his strength, his unwavering loyalty. She respected his judgment, his experience, his ability to navigate the treacherous currents of the underworld. And she couldn't deny the physical attraction, the spark that still flickered between them, despite their attempts to suppress it. One evening, Bianca was working late in her office, reviewing a complex financial report. Alessandro was with her, as usual, standing by the window, his gaze fixed on the city lights. The silence in the room was comfortable, familiar, a testament to the countless hours they had spent working together. Bianca sighed, rubbing her tired eyes. "I don't understand this," she said, gesturing to the report. "It doesn't make sense. The numbers don't add up." Alessandro walked towards her, his movements fluid and graceful. He leaned over her shoulder, his breath warm against her ear, and pointed to a specific line in the report. "Look here," he said, his voice low and calm. "This is where the discrepancy lies. It's a hidden account, cleverly disguised, but it's there." Bianca studied the line he had indicated, her brow furrowed in concentration. Suddenly it clicked. She saw the pattern, the subtle manipulation of the numbers. It was a classic money laundering scheme, expertly executed. "You're right," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "How did you see that?" He smiled, a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "I have a knack for finding things that are hidden," he said, his gaze meeting hers. There was a double meaning in his words, a subtle reference to their own hidden feelings, to the secrets they shared. Bianca felt a blush creep up her cheeks, and she quickly looked away. "Thank you, Alessandro," she said, her voice formal. "I appreciate your help." He straightened up, his expression unreadable. "It's my job," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. The moment passed, the tension dissipating. But the awareness remained, the unspoken acknowledgement of the connection between them. Later that night, Bianca found herself unable to sleep. She tossed and turned in her bed, her mind racing. She was thinking about Alessandro, about his enigmatic personality, about the secrets he held, about the way he made her feel. She got out of bed and walked to the balcony, overlooking the gardens. The night air was cool and crisp, the moon casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. She leaned against the railing, her gaze fixed on the distant cityscape. She heard a soft knock on the door, and her heart skipped a beat. She knew it was him. "Come in," she called out, her voice trembling slightly. Alessandro entered the room, his movements silent and stealthy. He closed the door behind him and stood there for a moment, his silver eyes studying her. "I couldn't sleep," he said, his voice low and husky. Bianca nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Me neither," she whispered. He walked towards her, stopping a few feet away. The moonlight illuminated his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his cheekbones, the intensity of his gaze. "Bianca," he began, his voice hesitant. He stopped, unsure of what to say. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. The touch was electric, sending a jolt of awareness through her. "I know we said it couldn't happen again," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "But I can't stay away from you." Bianca's heart pounded in her chest. She had been trying to deny her feelings, to suppress her desires, but she couldn't any longer. She was drawn to him, irresistibly, like a moth to a flame. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines around his eyes, the silver streaks in his hair. "I know," she whispered. "Me neither." He leaned in and kissed her, a slow, tender kiss at first, then deepening, becoming more passionate, more urgent. It was a kiss that spoke of longing, of desire, of a connection that defied logic, that transcended the boundaries of their world. It was a kiss of surrender. But this time, it was not just a surrender to passion, but a surrender to the dangerous, unpredictable path they were choosing to walk together. The question remained, however, would this surrender lead to salvation or ruin? The answer hung in the balance, as delicate and precarious as the moonlight that bathed them in its ethereal glow. Chapter 8. The Price of Silence. The weeks that followed their second kiss were a delicate dance of stolen moments and veiled glances. Bianca and Alessandro were careful to maintain their professional facade in public, but behind closed doors, they allowed themselves to explore the forbidden territory of their mutual attraction. They would meet late at night in the library, or in Bianca's private suite, sharing whispered conversations, stolen kisses, and the intoxicating thrill of a secret shared. They spoke of their hopes, their fears, their dreams for the future, dreams that were increasingly intertwined. Bianca found herself falling deeply in love with Alessandro. She admired his strength, his intelligence, his unwavering loyalty. She was captivated by his enigmatic personality, his hidden depths, the way he made her feel safe and protected, yet also challenged and stimulated. Alessandro, in turn, seemed to be equally captivated by Bianca. He treated her with a tenderness, a respect that she had never experienced before. He saw her not as a pawn in a power game, but as a woman, a partner, an equal. He saw her strength, her vulnerability, her hidden fire. But their secret was a dangerous one. The mafia world was built on loyalty, on tradition, on the sanctity of marriage, even a marriage as loveless as Bianca's had been. Their affair was a betrayal of everything they were supposed to stand for, a transgression that could have dire consequences. One evening, Bianca and Alessandro were meeting in the library, discussing a new threat from a rival family, the Salernos. The Salernos had been making increasingly aggressive moves, encroaching on Bellini territory, challenging their authority. "We need to respond," Alessandro said, his voice firm. "We need to show them that we will not be intimidated." Bianca nodded, her brow furrowed in concern. "I agree," she said. "But we need to be careful. We don't want to start a war." Alessandro paced the room, his movements agitated. "A war may be unavoidable, Bianca," he said. "The Salernos are not known for their diplomacy." He stopped pacing and turned to her, his silver eyes intense. "We need to gather intelligence," he said. "We need to find out what they're planning, who their allies are, what their weaknesses are." He paused, his gaze lingering on her. "I have a contact," he said, his voice low and confidential. "Someone who can provide us with valuable information. But it's risky. Very risky." Bianca met his gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. "Who is it?"
she asked.
Alessandro hesitated for a moment, then said, "It's Isabella Martel, Marco's former mistress." The words hit Bianca like a physical blow. She had known, of course, that Marco had had other women. It was common knowledge in their world. But to hear Alessandro speak of it so openly, so casually, stung. And to learn that Alessandro was still in contact with one of Marco's mistresses, it filled her with a mixture of jealousy and suspicion. "You still see her?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Alessandro saw the hurt in her eyes, and his expression softened. "It's not what you think, Bianca," he said. "I haven't seen her in that way since Marco died. But she has connections. She knows things. She can help us." Bianca wanted to believe him, but a seed of doubt had been planted in her mind. She trusted Alessandro, but she also knew that he was a master of deception, a man who kept his secrets close. "I don't know, Alessandro," she said, her voice hesitant. "It seems dangerous. Too dangerous." He stepped closer, his presence enveloping her. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "I would never put you in danger, Bella Mia," he said, his voice a low whisper. "I promise you. I will handle this. I will protect you." His words were meant to reassure her, but they had the opposite effect. They reminded her of the power imbalance between them, of his role as her protector, her advisor, her lover. She was the Dawn, the leader of the Bellini family, but she was also a woman in love, a woman vulnerable to betrayal. She pulled away from his touch, her emotions in turmoil. "I need to think about this, Alessandro," she said. "I need some time." He nodded, his expression unreadable.
"Of course," he said.
"Take all the time you need." He left the room, leaving Bianca alone with her doubts, her fears, and the chilling realization that the price of silence, the price of their secret, might be higher than she was willing to pay. She had a choice to make, between trust and suspicion, between love and duty. But was it a false choice, a trap laid by the very world she was trying to navigate? The answer remained elusive, shrouded in the shadows of the palazzo, a silent threat to the fragile bond she had forged with Alessandro. Chapter 9. A Dance with the Devil. Bianca spent the next few days wrestling with her decision. The information Alessandro's contact could provide was crucial, potentially giving them a significant advantage over the Salernos. But the risk, the potential for betrayal, was immense. And the thought of Alessandro meeting with Marco's former mistress, even for business, filled her with a jealousy she couldn't ignore. She tried to focus on other matters, on the day-to-day operations of the family, but her mind kept returning to Isabella Martel. She researched the woman, digging into her past, trying to understand her motivations, her loyalties. She discovered that Isabella was a powerful figure in her own right, a woman who had built her own empire in the shadows, dealing in information, in secrets, in influence. She also discovered that Isabella had been deeply in love with Marco, and that his death had hit her hard. This only fueled Bianca's jealousy, making her question Alessandro's motives even more. Was he truly seeking information, or was he seeking something else? Was he still drawn to Isabella, to the ghost of Marco's past? One evening, Bianca decided to confront Alessandro. She found him in the library, reading by the fireplace. He looked up as she entered, his silver eyes meeting hers, a hint of a question in his gaze. "We need to talk," she said, her voice firm, despite the tremor in her heart. He closed his book and set it aside. "Of course," he said, his voice calm and controlled. "What's on your mind?" She walked towards him, stopping a few feet away. "Isabella Martel," she said, her voice direct. "I want to know everything. About your relationship with her, about the information she has, about the risks involved." Alessandro studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I told you," he said, his voice even. "It's not what you think. My relationship with Isabella is purely professional. She has information that can help us, and that's all that matters." "But you are lovers," Bianca said, her voice rising slightly. "You and she, while Marco was alive." Alessandro's jaw tightened, a flicker of anger in his eyes. "That was a long time ago, Bianca," he said. "It has nothing to do with the present." "It has everything to do with the present," she exclaimed. "How can I trust you, Alessandro? How can I trust her? How do I know this isn't some kind of trap, some kind of elaborate scheme to betray me?" He stepped closer, his presence dominating the room. "You think I would betray you?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "After everything we've been through? After everything we've shared?" Bianca felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She did trust him. She did love him. But the doubts, the fears, were still there, gnawing at her. "I don't know what to think, Alessandro," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm surrounded by enemies, by people who want to see me fail. I don't know who to trust." He reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the tears that were streaming down her cheeks. "You can trust me, Bianca," he said, his voice soft and tender. "I swear to you, I would never betray you. I would die for you." His words, his touch, melted her resolve. She leaned into him, her body trembling, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "I'm scared, Alessandro," she whispered. "I'm so scared." He kissed her forehead, his lips lingering on her skin. "I know," he said. "But you're not alone. I'm here. I'll always be here." They stood there for a long moment, embraced in the silence of the library, the only sound their shared breathing. Bianca felt a sense of peace, a sense of comfort, that she hadn't felt in weeks. She knew that the risks were still there, that the dangers were real, but in his arms, she felt safe, protected. "All right," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. "All right. Meet with her. But I want to be there. I want to be a part of this." Alessandro pulled back slightly, his silver eyes searching hers. "It's too dangerous, Bianca," he said. "I can't risk your safety." "I'm not afraid," she said, her voice firm. "I'm the Don, Alessandro. I need to be involved. I need to know what's going on." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded, his expression a mixture of reluctance and admiration. "Very well," he said. "But you'll do exactly as I say. No questions, no arguments. Understood?" Bianca met his gaze, her own eyes filled with a newfound determination. "Understood," she said. It was a dance with the devil, a gamble with her life, her heart, and the future of the Bellini family. But she was ready, or so she thought. The true test, she knew, was yet to come. The meeting with Isabella Martel would reveal more than just information. It would reveal the true depths of loyalties, betrayals, and the dangerous game they were all playing. Chapter 10. Scars on the Soul. The meeting with Isabella Martel was arranged for the following evening at a discreet, secluded villa on the outskirts of Rome. Bianca insisted on accompanying Alessandro, despite his reservations. She felt a need to be present, to assess Isabella for herself, to gauge the risks and the potential rewards. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple black dress that was both elegant and understated. She wore minimal jewelry, only the Bellini ring, a symbol of her authority and a reminder of the weight of her responsibilities. She wanted to project an image of strength, of confidence, of control. Alessandro arrived to pick her up, his expression a mixture of concern and admiration. He was dressed in a dark suit, his usual attire, but there was a tension in his posture, a guardedness in his eyes, that betrayed his unease. "Are you sure about this, Bianca?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "It's not too late to change your mind." Bianca met his gaze, her own eyes steady and unwavering. "I'm sure," she said. "I need to do this, Alessandro. For the family and for myself." He nodded, accepting her decision, but his concern was evident. He knew that this meeting was a gamble, a dangerous dance with the devil. He knew that Isabella Martel was a formidable woman, a woman with her own agenda, her own secrets. They drove to the villa in silence, the tension between them palpable. Bianca's mind raced, imagining various scenarios, trying to anticipate Isabella's moves, trying to prepare herself for whatever might happen. The villa was a beautiful, secluded estate, surrounded by high walls and lush gardens. It was a place of secrets, a place where deals were struck and betrayals were plotted. As they approached the villa, Bianca felt a shiver of apprehension run down her spine. They were greeted at the door by a stern-faced guard, who led them through a series of dimly lit corridors to a lavishly decorated drawing room. Isabella Martel was waiting for them, seated on a plush velvet sofa, a glass of wine in her hand. She was a striking woman, even more beautiful than Bianca had imagined. She had long, dark hair, piercing green eyes, and a sensual, alluring presence. She was dressed in a flowing red dress that accentuated her curves, her every movement exuding confidence and power. Isabella rose to greet them, her smile elegant and welcoming, but there was a hint of calculation in her eyes. "Alessandro," she said, her voice smooth and melodic, "it's been too long." She turned to Bianca, her gaze assessing, appraising. "And you must be Bianca," she said. "Marco's widow. I've heard so much about you." Bianca met her gaze, her own eyes unyielding. "And I've heard a great deal about you, Isabella," she said, her voice cool and controlled. The two women sized each other up, a silent battle of wills taking place. Bianca could feel the tension in the room, the undercurrent of rivalry, of suspicion, of something else. Something she couldn't quite define. Alessandro stepped forward, breaking the tension. "Isabella," he said, his voice formal, "we're here to discuss business." "The Salernos." Isabella's smile widened, a hint of amusement flickering in her eyes. "Of course," she said. "Business. Always business." She gestured for them to sit, and they took their places on the opposite sofa. Isabella poured them each a glass of wine, her movements graceful and deliberate. "I understand you have some information that could be useful to us," Alessandro said, getting straight to the point. Isabella nodded, her gaze lingering on Alessandro. "Indeed I do," she said. "I have sources, shall we say, close to the Salernos. I know their plans, their weaknesses, their secrets." She paused, her gaze shifting to Bianca. "But information, my dear, comes at a price." Bianca met her gaze, unfazed. "And what is your price, Isabella?" she asked. Isabella smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that sent a shiver down Bianca's spine. "Let's just say," she said, "that I'm interested in collaboration. A mutually beneficial partnership." She looked at Alessandro again, and this time a different look passed between them. It was quick, almost imperceptible. Bianca, trained to read subtle cues, caught it. A flicker of memory. Shared history. Something deeper. The conversation continued, Isabella revealing bits and pieces of information, hinting at more, always circling back to the idea of a partnership. She was a master of manipulation, a skilled negotiator, a woman who knew how to use her power to her advantage. As the evening wore on, Bianca grew increasingly uneasy. She could sense that there was something more going on beneath the surface, something that Isabella wasn't revealing. She also couldn't shake the feeling of jealousy, the suspicion that Alessandro and Isabella still shared a connection, a bond that went beyond business. At one point, Isabella excused herself to make a phone call, leaving Bianca and Alessandro alone. Bianca turned to him, her eyes filled with questions. "Alessandro," she began, but he cut her off. "Not here, Bianca," he warned, his voice low. "We don't know who might be listening." He gestured subtly around the room, his eyes narrowed. He suspected the room was bugged. The rest of the meeting was a tense, carefully choreographed dance. Information was exchanged, promises were made, but the underlying tension, the unspoken questions remained. As they were leaving, Isabella stopped Bianca, placing a hand on her arm. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Bianca," she said, her voice deceptively sweet. "I sense we will be seeing a great deal more of each other." Her eyes flickered to Alessandro, then back to Bianca. You have a very valuable man by your side. Don't let him go." The words were a veiled threat, a subtle challenge, a reminder of the complex web of relationships and betrayals that surrounded them. The scars on Alessandro's soul, the scars of his past with Marco and Isabella, were suddenly laid bare, a stark reminder of the price of power, the cost of silence, and the ever-present danger that lurked beneath the surface of their carefully constructed world. Bianca left feeling more uncertain than ever. Who was playing whom? The answer, she feared, was far more complicated than she could have ever imagined. Chapter 11. The Lioness Awakens. The days following the meeting with Isabella were filled with a gnawing unease for Bianca. Isabella's words, her veiled threats and insinuations, echoed in her mind, fueling her suspicions and anxieties. She found herself watching Alessandro more closely, scrutinizing his every move, searching for any sign of deception, any hint of a lingering connection with his former lover. She knew her jealousy was irrational, that it was clouding her judgment, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. She had trusted Alessandro implicitly, had relied on him, had fallen in love with him. But the encounter with Isabella had shaken her faith, had opened a chasm of doubt between them. One evening, Bianca decided to take a walk in the gardens of the palazzo, hoping to clear her head. The night air was cool and crisp, the scent of roses and jasmine filling her senses. She walked along the winding paths, her mind racing, trying to make sense of her tangled emotions. She found herself at the small, secluded gazebo where she and Alessandro had shared their first kiss, the memory of that night both sweet and painful. She sat down on the stone bench, gazing out at the moonlit landscape, her heart heavy with a sense of foreboding. She heard footsteps behind her, and her heart skipped a beat. She knew it was Alessandro. He had a way of moving silently, like a predator stalking its prey. He sat down beside her, not touching her, but his presence filled the small space. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken tension. "You've been distant," Alessandro said finally, his voice low and serious. "Ever since the meeting with Isabella." Bianca turned to him, her eyes searching his. "I don't know what to believe, Alessandro," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know who to trust." He met her gaze, his silver eyes intense. "You can trust me, Bianca," he said. "I swear to you, I have never lied to you." "But you have secrets," she countered. "Secrets about your past, about your relationship with Isabella." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "My past is complicated, Bianca," he said. "There are things I'm not proud of, things I've tried to forget. But those things affect us," she insisted. "They affect our relationship, our future." He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "I know," he said, "and I'm ready to tell you everything. But not here, not now. It's not safe." Bianca nodded, understanding his concern. The palazzo was filled with listening ears, with potential enemies. She knew that they couldn't afford to be overheard. "Where, then?" she asked. He smiled, a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "I know a place," he said. "A place where we can be alone, where we can talk freely." He stood up and offered her his hand. Bianca hesitated for a moment, then took it, allowing him to pull her to her feet. They walked hand in hand, in silence, to the garage, where Alessandro's sleek, black car was parked. They drove through the night, leaving the city behind, heading towards the coast. Bianca had no idea where they were going, but she trusted Alessandro, despite her doubts, despite her fears. She had to believe in him, in their love, in their future. They arrived at a small, secluded villa perched on a cliff overlooking the sea. It was a beautiful, romantic spot, far from the prying eyes of the palazzo, far from the dangers of the mafia world. Alessandro led her inside, the villa sparsely furnished but comfortable, with a large fireplace and windows that offered breathtaking views of the ocean. He lit a fire, and the room was filled with a warm, flickering glow. He turned to her, his silver eyes searching hers. "This is where I come when I need to think," he said. "When I need to escape." Bianca nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that this was a turning point, a moment of truth. She was about to learn Alessandro's secrets, the secrets that had haunted him, that had shaped him, that had the power to destroy their relationship. He motioned for her to sit, and then he joined her near the fireplace, turning to face her fully. Isabella, he began, his voice tight, was more than Marco's mistress. She was his confidant, his advisor, in some ways, even his partner. He trusted her with information he shared with no one else, not even me. Bianca listened, her body tense, as Alessandro recounted the complicated history he'd had, woven between Marco and Isabella. The story revealed a deep, emotional reliance Marco had on Isabella, something far beyond physical attraction. Alessandro's role had often been to facilitate, to protect, to be the intermediary. And you? Bianca asked, her voice a near whisper. Where did you fit in? Alessandro looked away, a muscle working in his jaw. I was loyal to Marco, he said. But Isabella, she saw something in me. Something I didn't even see in myself. He paused, taking a deep breath. We were lovers, yes. But it was brief, a mistake born out of a need for connection, a need for escape. It ended long before Marco died. And it was I who ended it. He turned back to her, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored her own. I never stopped being loyal to Marco, Bianca. But Isabella, she has a way of getting under your skin, of making you question everything. Bianca felt a wave of relief, but also a surge of anger. Anger at Isabella, at Marco, at the world that had created these twisted relationships, these dangerous secrets. And the information? Bianca asked. The information she has on the Salernos? It's real, Alessandro said. And it's valuable. But she wants something in return. Something more than just a partnership. She wants control. He looked at her, his gaze locking with hers. The fear had left his eyes, replaced by a steely resolve. She wants you, Bianca. She wants to use you, to manipulate you, to take over the Bellini family. Bianca stared at him. The lioness inside her awoke, fierce, protective. The tables had turned. It wasn't about jealousy anymore. It was about survival. It was about power. She won't, Bianca said, her voice cold and firm. She won't get away with it. The night had brought truth, had stripped away the doubts and fears. And in their place, a new, stronger bond had been forged, a bond tempered by honesty and fueled by a shared determination to fight for their future, for their love, for their power. The game had changed, and Bianca was no longer a pawn. She was a player, a queen, a lioness. And she was ready to roar. Chapter 12. Blood and Wine. The revelation of Isabella's true intentions galvanized Bianca. She was no longer the grieving widow, the naive newcomer to the mafia world. She was the Don, the head of the Bellini family, and she would not be manipulated. She would not be controlled. She would not be a pawn in anyone's game, not even Alessandro's. She spent the next few days strategizing with Alessandro, planning their next move. They decided to use Isabella's information, but they would also take precautions, anticipating her treachery, preparing for her betrayal. They would play her game, but they would play it on their own terms. Alessandro arranged a meeting with the Salernos, ostensibly to negotiate a truce, to find a peaceful resolution to their territorial dispute. But Bianca knew that this was just a facade, a way to lure them into a trap. She had no intention of making peace with the Salernos. She intended to crush them, to eliminate them as a threat to the Bellini family. The meeting was set to take place at a neutral location, a renowned restaurant in the heart of Rome, known for its discreet clientele and its impeccable security. Bianca insisted on attending the meeting, despite Alessandro's concerns for her safety. She wanted to be there, to face her enemies, to show them her strength, her resolve. She dressed carefully for the occasion, choosing a powerful red dress that symbolized both her authority and her defiance. She wore the Bellini ring, its serpent gleaming, a reminder of the legacy she had inherited and the power she now wielded. Alessandro, as always, was her shadow, her protector, her advisor. He was dressed in a dark suit, his silver eyes watchful and alert. He had arranged for a team of their most trusted soldati to be stationed discreetly around the restaurant, ready to intervene if necessary. The Salernos arrived at the restaurant, a group of 5 men, led by their Don, a ruthless, aging gangster named Giovanni Salerno. They were greeted by Bianca and Alessandro, the atmosphere tense and charged with unspoken hostility. They were shown to a private dining room, a lavishly decorated space with a long, mahogany table set with fine china and crystal glasses. The air was thick with the scent of expensive wine and the anticipation of violence. Bianca took her place at the head of the table, Alessandro standing behind her, his presence a silent warning. Giovanni Salerno sat opposite her, his eyes narrowed, his expression guarded. The meeting began with polite formalities, a superficial exchange of pleasantries. But beneath the surface, the tension was palpable, the threat of violence ever present. Giovanni Salerno was the first to break the ice, his voice harsh and grating. "So, Bianca," he said, his gaze sweeping over her dismissively, "you've decided to come to your senses. You're ready to cede your territory, to acknowledge our superiority." Bianca met his gaze, her own eyes steady and unwavering. "I'm here to discuss a mutually beneficial agreement, Giovanni," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But I will not be intimidated, and I will not surrender what is rightfully mine." Giovanni scoffed, a sound of derision that echoed in the room. "You're a woman, Bianca," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You don't belong in this world. You should go back to arranging flowers and raising children." Bianca's jaw tightened, but she kept her composure. She had expected this sexism, this blatant disrespect. She had learned to use it to her advantage, to lull her enemies into a false sense of security. "This is my family, Giovanni," she said, her voice rising slightly. "And I will protect it, no matter the cost." The conversation escalated, becoming more heated, more confrontational. Giovanni made demands, threats, veiled insults. Bianca countered, refusing to back down, refusing to show any sign of weakness. Alessandro remained silent throughout the exchange, his presence a constant reminder of the power that backed Bianca, the force that stood ready to defend her. Suddenly, the door to the dining room burst open, and several armed men stormed in, weapons drawn. They were not Bellini soldati. They were Isabella's men. "What is the meaning of this?" Giovanni Salerno roared, jumping to his feet. A familiar figure entered the room, her red dress flowing around her, a cruel smile on her lips. "Isabella Martel. I believe," she said, her voice smooth and silky, "it's time for a change of leadership." She turned to Bianca, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "You were a fool to trust me, Bianca," she said. "You should have known that I would never be content to play second fiddle. I am the rightful heir to Marco's empire, and I will take what is mine." Bianca met her gaze, unfazed. She had anticipated this betrayal, had prepared for it. She had known that Isabella was not to be trusted, that she was playing her own game. "You underestimate me, Isabella," Bianca said, her voice calm and controlled. "I am not as naive as you think." She gave a subtle nod to Alessandro, and he sprang into action. He disarmed the nearest gunman with a swift, precise movement, his own weapon drawn and aimed at Isabella. At the same time, the Bellini soldati, who had been waiting in the wings, stormed the room, engaging Isabella's men in a fierce gun battle. The dining room erupted in chaos, the sound of gunfire and shouting filling the air. Bianca remained seated, her expression calm and resolute, despite the danger that surrounded her. She had planned for this, had anticipated every move. The fight was short and brutal. The Bellini soldati, better trained and better equipped, quickly overpowered Isabella's men. Giovanni Salerno and his men, caught in the crossfire, were taken down as well. Isabella, seeing her plan unravel, tried to escape, but Alessandro blocked her path, his gun trained on her. "It's over, Isabella," he said, his voice cold and hard. Isabella glared at him, her eyes filled with hatred. "You were always Marco's lapdog," she spat. "And now you're hers."
Alessandro smiled, a chilling, mirthless smile.
I am loyal to the Bellini family, he said. And Bianca is the Dawn. He lowered his gun, not to shoot her, but to signal to Bianca. It was her decision, her call. Bianca rose from her chair, her red dress stained with the splattered wine from the overturned table, a stark contrast to the blood that now stained the floor. She walked towards Isabella, her gaze unwavering. You made a mistake, Isabella, she said, her voice low and dangerous. You underestimated me. You underestimated the Bellini family. She paused, her eyes locking with Isabella's. The room was silent, the only sound the ragged breathing of the survivors. I could kill you, Bianca said, her voice a whisper. But that would be too easy. You will live with your failure, with the knowledge that you were defeated by a woman. A widow. She turned to Alessandro, her gaze softening.
Take her, she said.
And make sure she understands the price of her betrayal. The lioness had roared. Blood and wine mingled on the floor, a testament to the brutal reality of their world, a symbol of Bianca's victory, and a chilling reminder of the price of power. The night had proven one thing above all else. Bianca Bellini was not to be trifled with. Chapter 13. The Falcon's Flight. The aftermath of the bloody confrontation at the restaurant sent shockwaves through the Roman underworld. Bianca's decisive action, her ruthless elimination of both the Salernos and Isabella Martel, established her as a force to be reckoned with. She was no longer seen as the grieving widow, the inexperienced newcomer. She was the Dawn, the undisputed leader of the Bellini family, a woman who commanded respect and fear. Isabella was not killed, as Bianca had made clear. Instead, she was stripped of her power, her assets seized, her network dismantled. She was exiled, banished from Rome, a broken woman, a living testament to Bianca's power and ruthlessness. Alessandro had ensured, with a chilling efficiency, that Isabella would never again be a threat to the Bellini family, nor to Bianca herself. In the weeks that followed, Bianca consolidated her power, forging new alliances, strengthening her existing networks, and expanding the Bellini empire. She implemented her vision for the family, moving away from the more brutal aspects of their traditional business and focusing on legitimate enterprises, investing in real estate, technology, and renewable energy. She also made changes within the family structure, promoting those who had proven their loyalty and replacing those who had shown any sign of hesitation or dissent. She created a new council, a group of trusted advisors who shared her vision and who were committed to her leadership. Alessandro remained her closest confidant, her right hand, her lover. Their relationship, forged in the crucible of danger and betrayal, had deepened, becoming stronger, more resilient. They continued to meet in secret, sharing stolen moments, whispered conversations, and the intoxicating thrill of a forbidden love. But their relationship was no longer a secret, not entirely. The whispers, the rumors, had circulated throughout the family and beyond. Bianca knew that some disapproved, that some saw it as a weakness, a vulnerability. But she didn't care. She had earned her position, she had proven her strength, and she would not be dictated to by the outdated traditions of the mafia world. One evening, Bianca and Alessandro were at the secluded coastal villa, the place where they had first revealed their secrets, where they had first acknowledged their love. They were standing on the balcony, overlooking the sea, the moon casting a silvery glow on the water. They talk about us, Bianca said, her voice soft, breaking the comfortable silence. Alessandro nodded, his arm around her waist, his touch warm and reassuring. I know, he said. Let them talk. Bianca leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Our relationship? The risks we take? He turned to her, his silver eyes searching hers. Never, he said, his voice firm. I regret nothing. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, Bianca. He kissed her, a slow, tender kiss that spoke of love, of loyalty, of a shared destiny. It was a kiss that sealed their bond, a promise of a future together, a future they would build, despite the dangers, despite the challenges. I love you, Alessandro, Bianca whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "And I love you, Bellamia," he said. "More than words can say." They stood there for a long moment, embraced in the silence of the night, the only sound the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. The next day, Bianca received a summons, an invitation to a meeting of the Commission, the governing body of the Italian Mafia, the Council of Dons from the most powerful families across the country. It was an unprecedented honor, a recognition of her status, her power, her influence. Bianca knew that this was a crucial moment, a test of her leadership, a chance to solidify her position within the wider mafia world. She also knew that it was a dangerous game, a gathering of wolves, where alliances shifted and betrayals were commonplace. She prepared carefully for the meeting, consulting with Alessandro, gathering intelligence, anticipating the challenges she would face. She chose a simple, elegant black dress, a symbol of her authority and her understated power. She wore the Bellini ring, its serpent gleaming, a reminder of the legacy she represented. Alessandro accompanied her to the meeting, which was held at a heavily guarded estate in Sicily, the ancestral home of one of the oldest and most powerful mafia families. The atmosphere was tense, formal, the air thick with the scent of power and the undercurrent of danger. Bianca was the only woman present, surrounded by a sea of men, seasoned dons, hardened criminals, ruthless leaders. They watched her with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and grudging respect. The meeting was a long and arduous affair, a series of negotiations, debates, and power plays. Bianca held her own, asserting her position, defending her interests, forging alliances, and making it clear that she was not to be trifled with. She spoke with confidence, with authority, with a quiet strength that commanded attention. She demonstrated her knowledge of the mafia world, her understanding of its complexities, her commitment to its traditions, but also her willingness to challenge its outdated norms. She proposed new initiatives, new partnerships, new ways of doing business. She advocated for a more modern, more sophisticated approach to the mafia's operations, arguing that adaptation was essential for survival in the changing world. Her proposals were met with a mixture of resistance and cautious approval. Some of the older dons were wary of change, clinging to the old ways, the old methods. But others, particularly the younger ones, were intrigued by her vision, seeing the potential for growth, for increased power and influence. Alessandro remained by her side throughout the meeting, a silent, watchful presence, offering subtle guidance, intervening only when necessary to reinforce her authority. At the end of the meeting, Bianca had achieved her goals. She had secured her position within the commission, she had forged new alliances, and she had established herself as a leader to be respected and feared. As they were leaving the estate, one of the older dons, a man named Don Salvatore, approached Bianca. He was a powerful figure, respected for his wisdom and his long history within the mafia. "Signora Bellini," he said, his voice gravelly, "you have impressed me. You have the spirit of a lioness and the cunning of a falcon. You are a worthy successor to your husband." He paused, his gaze intense. "But remember," he said, "the higher the falcon flies, the further it has to fall. Be careful, Don Bianca. The world is full of enemies, and even those who seem to be your allies may be waiting for the opportunity to strike." His words were a warning, a reminder of the precarious nature of power, the ever-present threat of betrayal. But Bianca met his gaze unfazed. She had learned to navigate the treacherous currents of the mafia world. She had learned to survive, to thrive. "Thank you, Don Salvatore," she said, her voice calm and controlled. "I will heed your words. But I am not afraid. I am the falcon, and I am ready to fly." The flight, however, would not be without turbulence. The winds of change, of ambition, and of revenge were already brewing, a silent storm gathering on the horizon, threatening to test the strength and resilience of the newly crowned falcon. Chapter 14. Masks and Mirrors. The return to Rome was marked by a subtle shift in the atmosphere surrounding Bianca. Her success at the commission had solidified her power, but it had also made her a target. The whispers grew louder, the scrutiny more intense. She knew that she was being watched, assessed, judged by her rivals, by her allies, and even by those within her own family. She found herself increasingly relying on Alessandro, her trust in him deepening with each passing day. He was her confidant, her advisor, her protector, and her lover. He was the only one she could truly be herself with, the only one who saw her vulnerabilities, her fears, her doubts. But even with Alessandro, Bianca felt a growing sense of isolation, a feeling of being surrounded by masks and mirrors, unsure of who to trust, unsure of who was friend or foe. The mafia world was a place of deception, of hidden agendas, of shifting alliances. And Bianca was at the center of it all, a solitary figure navigating a treacherous labyrinth. One evening, Bianca and Alessandro were in her private suite, discussing a new threat that had emerged, a coalition of smaller families who were challenging the Bellini's dominance in the lucrative construction industry. "We need to identify the ringleaders," Alessandro said, his voice serious. "We need to understand their motivations, their weaknesses, their connections." Bianca nodded, her brow furrowed in concern. "I agree," she said. "But it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Everyone is wearing a mask, everyone is playing a role." Alessandro reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "We'll find them, Bianca," he said, his voice reassuring. "We always do." But there was a hint of doubt in his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty that betrayed his own anxieties. He knew that this new threat was different, more complex, more dangerous than anything they had faced before. Later that night, Bianca found herself unable to sleep. She tossed and turned in her bed, her mind racing, replaying conversations, analyzing faces, searching for clues. She felt a growing sense of unease, a premonition that something was about to happen, something that would change everything. She got out of bed and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Rome, the eternal city, a place of beauty and history, but also a place of darkness and betrayal. She felt a sense of detachment, as if she were watching a play unfold, a drama in which she was both the protagonist and a spectator. She heard a soft knock on the door, and her heart skipped a beat. She knew it was Alessandro. "Come in," she called out, her voice trembling slightly. He entered the room, his movements silent and stealthy. He was dressed in his usual dark clothes, but there was a tension in his posture, a guardedness in his eyes, that alarmed her. "What is it?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. He closed the door behind him and walked towards her, stopping a few feet away. "We have a problem," he said, his voice low and serious. He proceeded to tell her about a series of disturbing events that had taken place in the past few hours. Several of their key businesses had been attacked, their operations disrupted, their employees intimidated. It was a coordinated effort, a clear message from their enemies. "Who is behind it?" Bianca asked, her voice tight with anger and frustration. Alessandro hesitated for a moment, then said, "We don't know for sure. But all signs point to Antonio." Bianca felt a chill run down her spine. Antonio, Marco's elder brother, had always been a thorn in her side, a constant source of resentment and opposition. She had thought she had neutralized him, had marginalized him within the family. But she had underestimated his ambition, his ruthlessness, his cunning. "He's making his move," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He's trying to take over." Alessandro nodded, his expression grim. "He has allies," he said, "within the family and outside of it. He's been building a coalition, gathering support, waiting for the right moment to strike." Bianca felt a surge of anger, but also a sense of determination. She would not be defeated. She would not be overthrown. She had fought too hard, had sacrificed too much, to lose it all now. "We need to act quickly," she said, her voice firm. "We need to strike back, before he can gain any more ground." Alessandro nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "I agree," he said. "But we need to be careful. Antonio is dangerous, and he's surrounded by loyal men. We need a plan." They spent the rest of the night strategizing, planning their next move, anticipating Antonio's actions, preparing for a confrontation. They were like two chess players, engaged in a deadly game, each move carefully calculated, each decision carrying life or death consequences. As dawn approached, Bianca felt a sense of exhaustion, but also a sense of exhilaration. She was ready for this fight, ready to defend her position, her family, her love. She had learned to play the game, to wear the masks, to navigate the mirrors. She turned to Alessandro, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "We'll win," she said, her voice confident. "We have to." He smiled, a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "We will," he said. "Together." He leaned in to kiss her, but stopped, inches away, his gaze sweeping her face. "One thing though, Bianca," he said, his voice suddenly serious. "This war with Antonio, it will test everything. Trust no one until this is over." Not completely. The warning hung between them, a chilling reminder of the world they lived in. Even the closest of allies, the most trusted of friends, could be turned, could be bought, could be betrayed. The game of masks and mirrors was about to reach its climax, and Bianca knew that she had to be prepared for anything, even the unthinkable. Chapter 15. The Unforgiving Sea. Alessandro's warning echoed in Bianca's mind as they prepared for the inevitable confrontation with Antonio. The tension within the palazzo was palpable, the air thick with suspicion and uncertainty. Everyone knew that a storm was brewing, that a power struggle was about to erupt, and they were all choosing sides, aligning themselves with either Bianca or Antonio. Bianca and Alessandro worked tirelessly, gathering intelligence, securing loyalties, and preparing for the worst. They knew that Antonio was a formidable opponent, ruthless and cunning, and that he would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. He had been waiting for this opportunity, had been planning his coup for years, and he was now ready to strike. One evening, Bianca received an anonymous message, a cryptic note delivered by a trusted courier. The message indicated that Antonio was planning to make his move within days, that he had secured the support of several key figures within the commission, and that he intended to challenge Bianca's leadership at a formal gathering of the Bellini family. Bianca knew that this was her chance, her opportunity to confront Antonio, to expose his treachery, and to eliminate him as a threat. She also knew that it was a trap, a dangerous gamble that could cost her everything. She shared the message with Alessandro, and they discussed their options. They decided to accept Antonio's challenge, to attend the gathering, and to use it as an opportunity to strike back. They would expose Antonio's plot, reveal his allies, and destroy his credibility within the family. They prepared carefully for the confrontation, gathering evidence of Antonio's treachery, securing the support of loyal Cape regimes, and preparing a contingency plan in case things went wrong. They knew that they were walking into a lion's den, that they were surrounded by enemies, but they were determined to prevail. The gathering was held at a grand, historic villa on the coast, overlooking the unforgiving sea. It was a beautiful, dramatic setting, a place of both celebration and danger. The atmosphere was tense, formal, the air filled with the scent of expensive perfume and the undercurrent of violence. Bianca dressed for the occasion in a striking black gown, a symbol of her authority and her mourning, a reminder of the husband she had replaced and the brother-in-law she was about to confront. She wore the Bellini ring, its serpent gleaming, a reminder of the legacy she represented and the power she wielded. Alessandro, as always, was her shadow, her protector, her advisor. He was dressed in a dark suit, his silver eyes watchful and alert, his hand never far from the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. They arrived at the villa, greeted by a sea of faces, some familiar, some unknown, all watching them with a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and anticipation. They were led to the main hall, a vast, opulent space filled with long tables laden with food and wine. Antonio was already there, seated at the head table, surrounded by his supporters. He rose to greet Bianca, his smile forced and insincere. "Bianca," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "I'm so glad you could make it. I was beginning to think you were afraid to face me." Bianca met his gaze, her own eyes steady and unwavering. "I'm not afraid of you, Antonio," she said, her voice calm but firm. I'm here to address your concerns. The gathering began with a series of speeches, formal pronouncements, and veiled threats. Antonio spoke at length, criticizing Bianca's leadership, accusing her of incompetence, of betraying the family's traditions, of being unfit to rule. Bianca listened patiently, allowing him to speak, allowing him to dig his own grave. She knew that his accusations were baseless, that his support was fragile, that his ambition would ultimately be his downfall. When it was her turn to speak, Bianca rose from her chair, her black gown flowing around her, her presence commanding attention. She addressed the gathering, her voice clear and strong, her words carefully chosen. She acknowledged Antonio's concerns, but she refuted his accusations, presenting evidence of his own treachery, his own plots, his own attempts to undermine her authority. She revealed his alliances with rival families, his secret dealings, his betrayal of the Bellini family. She spoke with passion, with conviction, with a quiet strength that silenced her critics and inspired her supporters. She reminded them of her accomplishments, of the successes she had achieved, of the vision she had for the future of the family. As she spoke, she could see the tide turning, the support shifting from Antonio to her. His allies began to distance themselves, his supporters began to waver, his confidence began to crumble. Finally, she delivered her final blow, revealing a secret that Antonio had kept hidden for years, a secret that would destroy his credibility and expose him as a hypocrite. It was a secret that Alessandro had uncovered, a piece of information that had cost him dearly, a sacrifice he had made for Bianca, for the family. The revelation stunned the gathering, silencing Antonio and his supporters. The truth was out, the masks were off, and the mirrors were shattered. Antonio, his face pale and contorted with rage, tried to deny the accusation, but it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming. The damage was done. Bianca looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and contempt. "It's over, Antonio," she said, her voice low and final. "You have lost." Before Antonio could react, before anyone could intervene, Alessandro moved with lightning speed, disarming Antonio's guards and placing him under arrest. The Bellini soldati, loyal to Bianca, secured the villa, ensuring that no one could escape. The gathering erupted in chaos, but Bianca remained calm, her authority unchallenged. She had won. She had defeated Antonio, had exposed his treachery, and had secured her position as the dawn of the Bellini family. But as she looked out at the unforgiving sea, at the waves crashing against the shore, she knew that this victory was just a temporary reprieve. The mafia world was a constant battle, a relentless struggle for power, and there would always be new enemies, new threats, new betrayals. The sea was a reminder of the ever-present danger, the unforgiving nature of their world, and the price of leadership. But for now, she had weathered the storm. Chapter 16. Threads of Fate. With Antonio's failed coup and subsequent imprisonment, Bianca's control over the Bellini family was absolute. The internal threat had been neutralized, and the message to any potential rivals was clear: challenge Bianca and face the consequences. She had proven herself to be a shrewd strategist, a ruthless leader, and a woman capable of wielding power with both grace and force. However, the victory came at a cost. The confrontation with Antonio had exposed deep fissures within the family, revealing the fragility of loyalties and the ever-present threat of betrayal. Bianca knew that she could never truly relax, that she had to remain vigilant, always watching her back, always anticipating the next challenge. In the aftermath of the coup, Bianca focused on rebuilding trust within the family, consolidating her power, and expanding the Bellini empire. She promoted those who had remained loyal to her, rewarding their faithfulness with greater responsibilities and a larger share of the family's wealth. She also reached out to those who had wavered, offering them a chance to redeem themselves, to prove their loyalty anew. Alessandro remained her constant companion, her advisor, her protector, and her lover. Their relationship had deepened, strengthened by the trials they had faced together. They were bound by a shared love, a shared ambition, and a shared understanding of the dangerous world they inhabited. One evening, Bianca and Alessandro were at their secluded coastal villa, enjoying a rare moment of peace and tranquility. They were sitting on the balcony, overlooking the sea, the setting sun casting a golden glow on the water. "It's beautiful," Bianca said, her voice soft, her head resting on Alessandro's shoulder. Alessandro nodded, his arm around her waist, his touch warm and reassuring.
"It is," he said.
"A reminder that there is still beauty in the world, even in our world." Bianca sighed, a hint of melancholy in her voice. "Sometimes I wonder," she said, "if it's all worth it. The power, the wealth, the constant struggle, is it worth the price we pay?" Alessandro turned to her, his silver eyes searching hers. "It's the life we were born into, Bianca," he said. "The life we chose. We can't escape it, but we can shape it. We can make it better." Bianca met his gaze, her own eyes filled with a mixture of hope and resignation. "I know," she said, "but sometimes I dream of a different life. A life without fear, without violence, without betrayal." Alessandro kissed her forehead, his lips lingering on her skin. "We all have dreams, Bella Mia," he said. "But dreams are just that. Dreams. We have to live in the real world, and we have to fight for what we believe in." He paused, his gaze intense. "And I believe in you, Bianca," he said. "I believe in us. I believe in the future we can build together." His words were a comfort, a reassurance, a reminder of the love that bound them together, the strength they drew from each other. But even as she leaned into his embrace, Bianca couldn't shake the feeling that their future was uncertain, that their love was a fragile flower blooming in a field of thorns. The next day, Bianca received an unexpected visitor, a man named Lorenzo, who was Antonio's son. He was much younger than his father and different. Bianca had only met him in passing during the disastrous family dinner early in her reign. Lorenzo claimed he came in peace, that he wanted to distance himself from his father's actions, that he had no desire to challenge Bianca's leadership. He offered his loyalty, his service, his cooperation. Bianca was wary, suspicious of his motives. She knew that the mafia world was full of deception, that appearances could be deceiving. She had learned to trust no one completely, to question everything, to anticipate betrayal. She listened to Lorenzo's offer, her expression guarded, her mind racing. She questioned him, probed him, searching for any sign of deceit, any hint of a hidden agenda. Lorenzo was articulate, charming, and seemingly sincere. He presented himself as a modern, forward-thinking young man who rejected his father's old-fashioned ways, who wanted to embrace Bianca's vision for the family. He offered valuable information about his father's network, his allies, his secret dealings. Bianca was torn. On the one hand, Lorenzo's offer was tempting. He could be a valuable asset, a source of information, a bridge to a new generation of mafia leaders. On the other hand, he was Antonio's son, his heir, and the blood of betrayal ran deep in his veins. She turned to Alessandro, seeking his counsel, his advice. "What do you think?" she asked, her voice low and hesitant. Alessandro studied Lorenzo, his silver eyes assessing, evaluating.
"He's clever," he said.
"And he's ambitious. But I don't trust him. Not yet." He paused, his gaze intense. "We need to test him," he said. "We need to give him a chance to prove his loyalty, but we also need to be prepared for his treachery." Bianca nodded, her mind made up. She would accept Lorenzo's offer, but she would do so with caution, with skepticism, with her eyes wide open. She would give him a chance to prove himself, but she would also be ready to strike him down if he betrayed her. She turned back to Lorenzo, her expression unreadable. "Very well, Lorenzo," she said. "I accept your offer. But understand this. Loyalty is a two-way street. Betray me, and you will face the consequences." Lorenzo smiled, a confident, almost arrogant smile. "I understand, Don Bianca," he said. "You won't regret this." The threads of fate were weaving a new pattern, a new design, and Bianca knew that she was walking a tightrope, balancing between trust and suspicion, between opportunity and danger. Lorenzo's arrival was a new variable, a new challenge, and a new test of her leadership. Only time would tell if he was a friend or a foe, an asset or a liability. Chapter 17. A Crown of Thorns. Bianca's decision to accept Lorenzo's offer of loyalty was met with mixed reactions within the family. Some saw it as a shrewd move, a way to gain valuable intelligence and weaken Antonio's remaining influence. Others saw it as a dangerous gamble, a risk that could backfire and destabilize the fragile peace that Bianca had established. Alessandro remained skeptical, his instincts warning him that Lorenzo was not to be trusted. He advised caution, urging Bianca to keep a close watch on Antonio's son, to test his loyalty at every turn, and to be prepared for his eventual betrayal. Bianca, however, saw something in Lorenzo that intrigued her. He was intelligent, ambitious, and charismatic, qualities that she admired and that she believed could be useful to the family. She also saw a reflection of herself in him, a young, ambitious leader trying to forge a new path in a world dominated by tradition and violence. She decided to give Lorenzo a chance, to mentor him, to guide him, to see if he could truly be reformed, if he could truly embrace her vision for the family. She assigned him to a minor role within the organization, a position that allowed him to prove his worth without giving him access to sensitive information or significant power. Lorenzo proved to be a quick learner, eager to please, and surprisingly effective. He excelled in his new role, demonstrating a talent for negotiation, for problem-solving, and for building relationships. He quickly gained the respect of his colleagues, and even won over some of Bianca's most skeptical advisors. Alessandro, however, remained unconvinced. He observed Lorenzo closely, watching his every move, analyzing his interactions, searching for any sign of deception, any hint of a hidden agenda. He found nothing concrete, but his gut feeling told him that Lorenzo was playing a game, that he was hiding something, that he was waiting for the right moment to strike. One evening, Alessandro shared his concerns with Bianca. They were at their coastal villa, enjoying a quiet dinner, the sound of the waves a soothing backdrop to their conversation. "I don't trust him, Bianca," Alessandro said, his voice low and serious. "I don't trust Lorenzo. There's something about him, something that doesn't feel right." Bianca sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I know Alessandro," she said. "I have my doubts too. But he's been useful. He's proven himself to be capable." Alessandro shook his head. "He's playing the long game, Bianca," he said. "He's gaining your trust, building his reputation, waiting for the perfect opportunity to betray you." Bianca met his gaze, her own eyes filled with a mixture of frustration and uncertainty. "What do you suggest we do?" she asked. Alessandro leaned forward, his voice intense. "We need to test him," he said. "We need to give him a task, a mission, that will expose his true intentions. Something that will force him to choose between loyalty and betrayal." Bianca nodded, her mind racing, considering the possibilities. She knew that Alessandro was right, that they couldn't afford to be complacent, that they had to be proactive in protecting themselves from Lorenzo's potential treachery. They devised a plan, a carefully crafted test that would reveal Lorenzo's true colors. They would assign him to a seemingly important mission, a negotiation with a rival family over a lucrative smuggling route. But the mission was a trap, a setup designed to expose Lorenzo's loyalties and to eliminate him if he proved to be disloyal. Bianca presented the plan to Lorenzo, explaining the importance of the mission, the risks involved, and the rewards he would receive if he succeeded. Lorenzo accepted the assignment with enthusiasm, promising to do his best, to prove his loyalty, to earn Bianca's trust. As Lorenzo prepared for the mission, Alessandro and Bianca watched him closely, monitoring his every move, analyzing his communications, searching for any sign of duplicity. They had planted spies within his team, installed surveillance equipment in his office, and hacked into his phone and computer. The day of the mission arrived, and Lorenzo departed with his team, ostensibly to meet with the rival family. Bianca and Alessandro waited anxiously, their hearts pounding, their nerves on edge. They knew that this was a critical moment, a turning point in their relationship with Lorenzo, and a test of their own judgment. Hours passed, and the tension mounted. Bianca and Alessandro remained at the palazzo, glued to the monitors, listening to the audio feeds, watching the video streams, waiting for any sign of betrayal. Suddenly, the situation changed. The audio feed from Lorenzo's meeting went silent. The video feed showed chaos, a struggle, a gunfight. Lorenzo's team was under attack. Bianca and Alessandro exchanged a look of alarm. Had Lorenzo betrayed them? Had he walked into a trap? Or was he the victim of a double cross? Alessandro sprang into action, mobilizing a team of soldati, preparing to intervene, to rescue Lorenzo, or to eliminate him if he proved to be a traitor. Bianca, however, hesitated. She had a nagging feeling, a gut instinct, that something wasn't right. She couldn't explain it, but she sensed that there was more to the story, that there was a hidden layer of deception that they hadn't uncovered. She stopped Alessandro, her hand on his arm. "Wait," she said, her voice urgent. "Something's not right. I need to think." She closed her eyes, trying to clear her mind, trying to connect the dots, trying to understand what was really happening. And then it hit her. A realization, a sudden insight, that changed everything. "It's a setup," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "But not the way we thought. Lorenzo isn't betraying us. He's the target." Alessandro stared at her, his eyes wide with surprise. "What are you saying?" he asked. Bianca explained her theory, her sudden understanding of Lorenzo's true intentions. He wasn't trying to betray them, he was trying to prove his loyalty by sacrificing himself. He had anticipated the trap, had known that he was walking into danger, but he had done it anyway, to demonstrate his commitment to Bianca, to the Bellini family. Alessandro was skeptical, but he trusted Bianca's instincts. He agreed to hold back, to wait, to see how the situation unfolded. As they watched the monitors, they saw Lorenzo fighting bravely, defending himself against overwhelming odds. He was outnumbered, outgunned, but he refused to surrender. He was fighting for his life, for his honor, for his place within the Bellini family. Finally, after a tense and brutal struggle, Lorenzo emerged victorious. He had defeated his attackers, had survived the trap, had proven his loyalty beyond any doubt. Bianca and Alessandro were stunned, relieved, and deeply impressed. Lorenzo had shown incredible courage, incredible resilience, and incredible loyalty. He had passed the test, had earned their trust, and had proven himself to be a worthy member of the Bellini family. But the victory was bittersweet. Lorenzo had been severely wounded, his body battered and bruised, his spirit tested to its limits. He had been forced to wear a crown of thorns, to suffer for his loyalty, to prove himself in the most brutal way possible. And Bianca knew that she was responsible, that she had put him through this ordeal, that she had almost cost him his life. The weight of her leadership, the burden of her decisions, pressed down on her, a heavy reminder of the price of power and the ever-present threat of betrayal, even from within. Chapter 18. The Reckoning. Lorenzo's courageous survival of the orchestrated attack earned him not only Bianca's trust, but also a newfound respect within the Bellini family. He had proven his loyalty, his resilience, and his willingness to sacrifice himself for the greater good. Bianca, deeply remorseful for the ordeal she had put him through, welcomed him into her inner circle, making him one of her most trusted advisors. However, the incident also served as a stark reminder of the constant dangers and betrayals that lurked within the mafia world. Bianca knew that she could never truly let her guard down, that she had to remain vigilant, always anticipating the next threat, always questioning the motives of those around her. The attack on Lorenzo also raised questions about who was behind it. While it had initially appeared to be the work of a rival family, Bianca's intuition told her that there was a deeper conspiracy at play. She suspected that someone within the commission, or perhaps even within her own family, was trying to destabilize her leadership, to sow discord and chaos. She tasked Alessandro with investigating the attack, with uncovering the truth behind the plot, and with identifying those responsible. Alessandro, with his network of informants and his keen analytical skills, began to unravel the threads of the conspiracy, following the trail of evidence wherever it led. Meanwhile, Bianca focused on strengthening the Bellini family, consolidating her power and expanding their influence. She continued to implement her vision for a more modern, more diversified mafia, moving away from the traditional reliance on violence and intimidation and focusing on legitimate business ventures, political influence, and strategic alliances. She also began to groom Lorenzo as her potential successor, recognizing his intelligence, his ambition, and his unwavering loyalty. She saw in him a reflection of herself, a young, ambitious leader eager to make a mark on the world, to break free from the shackles of tradition, and to forge a new path for the family. As Alessandro delved deeper into the investigation, he uncovered a disturbing pattern of connections, a web of alliances and betrayals that reached the highest levels of the mafia hierarchy. He discovered that the attack on Lorenzo had been orchestrated by a coalition of powerful dons within the commission who were opposed to Bianca's leadership and her progressive reforms. These dons, remnants of the old guard, saw Bianca as a threat to their power, their traditions, and their way of life. They viewed her as an upstart, a woman who had dared to challenge the established order, and they were determined to remove her, by any means necessary. Alessandro also discovered that the conspiracy had roots within the Bellini family itself. There were still those who resented Bianca's rule, who yearned for the old days, who believed that a woman had no place leading a mafia family. These individuals, motivated by greed, ambition, and a thirst for revenge, had secretly allied themselves with the dons within the commission, providing them with information, support, and resources. The revelation was a blow to Bianca, a confirmation of her worst fears. She had known that she had enemies, but she had not realized the extent of their reach, the depth of their treachery. She felt a sense of betrayal, a sense of isolation, a feeling of being surrounded by vipers. She shared Alessandro's findings with Lorenzo, trusting him implicitly, knowing that he had proven his loyalty beyond any doubt. Lorenzo was outraged by the betrayal, by the conspiracy against Bianca, and he vowed to help her bring the traitors to justice. Together, Bianca, Alessandro, and Lorenzo devised a plan to expose the conspiracy, to reveal the identities of the dons and the family members involved, and to eliminate them as a threat. It was a dangerous gamble, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, but they were determined to prevail. They decided to use the upcoming annual gathering of the commission as the stage for their reckoning. It was a risky move, a bold challenge to their enemies, but it was also the perfect opportunity to expose their treachery in front of the entire mafia world. They carefully gathered evidence, collecting documents, recording conversations, and securing the testimonies of witnesses. They built a case against the conspirators, a damning indictment that would leave no room for doubt, no room for denial. The day of the commission gathering arrived, and Bianca, Alessandro, and Lorenzo traveled to Sicily, the ancestral home of the mafia, the heart of its power and its traditions. The atmosphere was tense, charged with anticipation, the air thick with the scent of danger and betrayal. The gathering was held in a grand, historic palazzo, a symbol of the mafia's enduring power and its resistance to change. The dons from across Italy were assembled, their faces masks of power and intrigue, their eyes watchful and wary. Bianca, dressed in a regal purple gown, a symbol of her authority and her defiance, took her place at the head table, Alessandro and Lorenzo by her side. She knew that she was walking into a lion's den, that she was surrounded by enemies, but she was not afraid. She was ready for this fight, ready to defend her position, her family, her love. The meeting began with the usual formalities, the reports, the discussions, the negotiations. But beneath the surface, the tension was palpable, the threat of violence ever present. Then, at the appointed moment, Bianca rose from her chair, her voice clear and strong, her gaze sweeping across the assembled dons. She began to speak, revealing the conspiracy, exposing the identities of those involved, presenting the evidence she had gathered. Her words were like thunderbolts, shattering the carefully constructed facade of unity and loyalty. The dons were stunned, shocked, and outraged. Accusations flew, denials were made, but the evidence was overwhelming, the truth undeniable. The gathering erupted in chaos, as the accused dons tried to defend themselves, to shift the blame, to escape the consequences of their actions. But Bianca, with the support of Alessandro and Lorenzo, maintained control, exposing their treachery, revealing their lies, and demanding justice. The reckoning was swift and brutal. The guilty dons were stripped of their power, their assets seized, their families disgraced. Some were killed, others were imprisoned, and a few were exiled, banished from the mafia world forever. The conspirators within the Bellini family were also dealt with, their betrayals exposed, their punishment severe. Bianca, though saddened by their treachery, showed no mercy, demonstrating that loyalty was paramount and that betrayal would not be tolerated. The gathering ended with Bianca's authority reaffirmed, her power consolidated, and her enemies vanquished. She had weathered the storm, had survived the reckoning, and had emerged stronger, more determined, and more respected than ever before. But the victory was not without its scars. The constant threat of betrayal, the weight of leadership, and the knowledge that she had been forced to condemn members of her own family left a deep mark on her soul. The reckoning had changed her, hardened her, and made her even more aware of the unforgiving nature of the world she ruled. Chapter 19. Ashes and Diamonds. The triumph at the commission marked a turning point in Bianca's reign. She had purged the disloyal elements, solidified her power, and sent a clear message to any remaining dissenters. Her rule was absolute, and her resolve was unbreakable. The Bellini family, cleansed of its internal conflicts, stood poised to enter a new era of prosperity and influence. However, the scars of betrayal lingered. Bianca found herself increasingly withdrawn, haunted by the faces of those she had been forced to condemn, both within and outside the family. The weight of her decisions, the constant vigilance required to maintain her position, and the knowledge that even those closest to her could be turned, took a toll on her spirit. Alessandro remained her steadfast anchor, his love and support unwavering. He understood the burden she carried, the loneliness of command, and the constant pressure she faced. He was her confidant, her protector, and the only person with whom she could truly be vulnerable. Lorenzo, too, had proven his worth, becoming an indispensable member of Bianca's inner circle. He had demonstrated his loyalty, his intelligence, and his commitment to Bianca's vision for the family. He had earned her trust, and she increasingly relied on him for advice and support. One evening, Bianca and Alessandro were at their coastal villa, seeking refuge from the pressures of the palazzo and the constant demands of their world. They were sitting on the balcony, watching the sunset over the sea, the sky ablaze with fiery colors. Bianca sighed, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning, Alessandro," she said, her voice soft and weary. "Drowning in the darkness, in the violence, in the betrayal." Alessandro reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "You're not drowning, Bianca," he said. "You're strong. You're resilient. You're a survivor." Bianca turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. "But at what cost, Alessandro?" she asked. "At what cost do we survive? How many lives must be sacrificed? How many betrayals must we endure?" Alessandro squeezed her hand, his silver eyes reflecting the fiery hues of the sunset. "We do what we must, Bianca," he said. "We protect our family, we defend our position, and we strive for a better future. It's not easy, but it's the only way." Bianca nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She knew that Alessandro was right, that there was no easy path, no escape from the realities of their world. But she still yearned for something more, something beyond the constant struggle, something beyond the darkness. "I want to build something, Alessandro," she said, her voice filled with a newfound determination. "Something that will last, something that will be a testament to our love, to our strength, to our resilience. Something that will rise from the ashes of the past." Alessandro smiled, a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "And what is it that you want to build, Bella Mia?" he asked. Bianca met his gaze, her own eyes shining with a vision of the future. I want to build a foundation, she said. A foundation that will support the children of our soldati, the families who have sacrificed so much for us. A place where they can be educated, where they can be cared for, where they can have a chance at a better life, a life free from the violence and the darkness of our world. Alessandro was moved by her words, by her compassion, by her desire to create something positive, something lasting, out of the ashes of their brutal reality. He knew that this was more than just a dream, that it was a commitment, a promise to the future. It's a noble goal, Bianca, he said, and I will help you achieve it. We will build this foundation together. They spent the next few months working tirelessly, planning, organizing, and securing the resources necessary to bring Bianca's vision to life. They established a charitable organization, funded by the Bellini family's vast wealth, dedicated to providing education, healthcare, and support to the children and families of their soldati. They built schools, hospitals, and community centers in the neighborhoods where their soldati lived, offering a safe haven, a place of hope, a chance for a brighter future. They recruited teachers, doctors, and social workers, providing them with the resources they needed to make a difference in the lives of those who had been marginalized and forgotten. Bianca took a personal interest in the foundation, visiting the schools and hospitals, meeting with the children and their families, listening to their stories, offering them her support and her encouragement. She found a sense of purpose, a sense of fulfillment in this work, a way to give back to the community that had sacrificed so much for her family. Lorenzo, too, played a key role in the foundation, using his skills and his connections to secure funding, to navigate the complex bureaucracy, and to build relationships with local communities. He proved to be a valuable asset, a dedicated and compassionate leader, and a true believer in Bianca's vision. As the foundation grew and flourished, Bianca felt a sense of peace, a sense of accomplishment that she had never experienced before. She had created something positive, something lasting, out of the darkness of her world. She had built a legacy, not of violence and fear, but of hope and opportunity. One evening, Bianca and Alessandro were visiting one of the foundation schools, watching the children play in the courtyard, their laughter echoing through the air. Bianca turned to Alessandro, her eyes filled with tears of joy. "We did it, Alessandro," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "We built something beautiful." Alessandro smiled, his arm around her waist, his touch warm and reassuring. "We did," he said. "And it's just the beginning." He leaned down and kissed her, a slow, tender kiss that spoke of love, of loyalty, of a shared dream. It was a kiss that sealed their bond, a promise of a future together, a future filled with hope, with purpose, and with the enduring power of love to rise from the ashes and create something beautiful, something lasting, something as precious and enduring as diamonds. But even diamonds can be shattered, and the peace they had found was about to be tested, one final time. Chapter 20. A New Dawn. The success of the foundation and the apparent stability within the Bellini family brought a period of relative peace, but Bianca knew it was the calm before the storm. The mafia world was never truly at rest, and the embers of old rivalries and new ambitions always simmered beneath the surface. She remained vigilant, always watchful, always anticipating the next threat. The threat, when it came, was unexpected and from a source Bianca had not anticipated. It wasn't a rival family, nor a disgruntled capo regime, nor even a resurrected enemy from the past.
It was the law.
A special task force, led by a tenacious and ambitious prosecutor named Isabella a different one Rinaldi, had been investigating the Bellini family for years, gathering evidence, building a case, and waiting for the right moment to strike. Rinaldi was determined to bring down Bianca and dismantle the Bellini empire, seeing it as a victory that would catapult her career to new heights. Rinaldi's investigation had been meticulous and far-reaching, uncovering evidence of money laundering, racketeering, and even murder. She had flipped several key witnesses, secured incriminating documents, and built a case that was seemingly airtight. One morning, Bianca received a summons, an official notice that she was being indicted on multiple charges, ranging from tax evasion to conspiracy to commit murder. The news sent shockwaves through the Bellini family, creating panic and uncertainty. Bianca, however, remained calm and resolute. She had faced challenges before, had overcome seemingly insurmountable odds, and she was not about to be intimidated by the law. She knew that she was innocent of some of the charges, and that the others were based on circumstantial evidence and the testimony of unreliable witnesses. She assembled her legal team, the best lawyers money could buy, and prepared for a protracted legal battle. She also tasked Alessandro and Lorenzo with gathering counter-evidence, discrediting the prosecution's witnesses, and protecting the family's assets. The trial was a media circus, a spectacle that captivated the nation. Bianca, the widow Dawn, the powerful and enigmatic leader of the Bellini family, was pitted against Rinaldi, the ambitious and relentless prosecutor, determined to bring her down. The courtroom was packed every day, filled with journalists, spectators, and members of the Bellini family, all eager to witness the clash of titans. Bianca, dressed in elegant but understated attire, maintained a dignified and composed demeanor throughout the proceedings, projecting an image of strength, innocence, and unwavering resolve. Alessandro and Lorenzo were constantly by her side, providing support, advice, and protection. They worked tirelessly behind the scenes, uncovering evidence, influencing witnesses, and ensuring that Bianca had the best possible defense. The trial was a grueling ordeal, a long and arduous process filled with legal maneuvering, dramatic testimony, and shocking revelations. Rinaldi presented a seemingly overwhelming case, calling witnesses, presenting documents, and painting a picture of Bianca as a ruthless and cold-blooded criminal mastermind. Bianca's legal team, however, fought back fiercely, challenging the evidence, cross-examining the witnesses, and exposing the flaws in Rinaldi's case. They presented their own witnesses, offered alternative explanations, and argued that Bianca was a victim of circumstance, a woman who had inherited a criminal empire and was trying to reform it. As the trial progressed, the tide began to turn. Bianca's lawyers successfully discredited several key witnesses, revealing their biases, their criminal pasts, and their motivations for lying. They also uncovered evidence that Rinaldi had withheld exculpatory information, had pressured witnesses, and had engaged in unethical conduct. The turning point came when Alessandro and Lorenzo uncovered a crucial piece of evidence, a recording of a conversation between Rinaldi and one of her key witnesses, in which they discussed fabricating evidence against Bianca. The recording was devastating, exposing Rinaldi's corruption and undermining the credibility of her entire case. When the recording was played in court, the courtroom erupted in chaos. Rinaldi's career was in ruins, her reputation shattered, and her case against Bianca collapsing. The jury, after deliberating for several days, returned a verdict of not guilty on all counts. Bianca was acquitted, exonerated, and vindicated. The courtroom erupted in cheers as Bianca's supporters celebrated her victory. Bianca, however, remained calm and composed, her expression unreadable. She had won the battle, but she knew that the war was far from over. As she left the courtroom, surrounded by her family and supporters, Bianca was greeted by a throng of journalists, all eager to hear her reaction. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the crowd, her voice clear and strong. "Justice has been served," she said.
But this trial was not just about me.
It was about the future of our family, about the future of our community, and about the fight against corruption and injustice. I am grateful for the support of my family, my friends, and all those who believed in me. And I promise that I will continue to fight for a better future, for a world free from violence, from fear, and from the abuse of power. Her words were met with applause and cheers, but Bianca knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. She had won a legal victory, but she had also made powerful enemies. She knew that Rinaldi and others like her would not give up, that they would continue to pursue her, to try to bring her down. That evening, Bianca, Alessandro, and Lorenzo celebrated their victory at the coastal villa, the place where they had shared so many moments of joy and sorrow, of triumph and despair. They were sitting on the balcony, overlooking the sea, the full moon casting a silvery glow on the water. It mirrored, in almost perfect fashion, their night together before the commission. Bianca had finally decided something, looking at Alessandro, then to Lorenzo. "It is time," she said, "for a new dawn." Both men stared at her. Lorenzo seemed shocked. Alessandro merely raised an eyebrow.
Bianca smiled.
"Lorenzo, you have shown bravery, cunning, intelligence. You've earned my trust, and you've proven your loyalty time and time again." Lorenzo seemed speechless. Alessandro finally spoke. "And what of you, bella mia?" Bianca smiled softly, looking at Alessandro, taking his hands. "I have fought my battles. I've won my wars. Now I want peace. I want a life with you, away from all of this." She turned, her gaze encompassing both men. "The Bellini family will be strong. Lorenzo will lead, and Alessandro will advise, just as he always has." Lorenzo finally found his voice, kneeling before Bianca. "I will not let you down, Don Bianca." Bianca smiled, placing a hand on his head. "I know you won't." She looked at Alessandro, her eyes filled with love. "And we, my love, will have our new dawn." The future was uncertain. The challenges remained, but for the first time in a long time, Bianca felt a sense of hope, a sense of peace, a sense of freedom. She had relinquished the crown, had passed on the torch, and had chosen love over power. It was a new dawn, not just for the Bellini family, but for Bianca and Alessandro, a new beginning, a chance to build a life together, a life free from the shadows, a life filled with the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Epilogue. The years that followed were a testament to Bianca's choices. Lorenzo, guided by Alessandro's wisdom and experience, proved to be a capable and forward-thinking Don, leading the Bellini family into a new era of prosperity and legitimacy. He continued Bianca's efforts to diversify the family's holdings, investing heavily in legitimate businesses and distancing himself from the more violent aspects of the mafia's past. He also maintained the foundation, ensuring that it continued to provide education, healthcare, and support to the children and families of the soldati. Bianca and Alessandro, meanwhile, retreated from the front lines of the mafia world, settling into a peaceful life in a secluded villa on the Amalfi coast. They traveled extensively, explored new cultures, and dedicated themselves to philanthropic endeavors. Bianca, finally free from the burdens of leadership, rediscovered her passion for art, taking up painting and sculpting, her creations reflecting the beauty and tranquility of her new life. Alessandro, though no longer actively involved in the day-to-day operations of the Bellini family, remained a trusted advisor to Lorenzo, offering his counsel and guidance when needed. He also found fulfillment in mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing his business acumen, and helping them to build successful and ethical enterprises. Their love for each other deepened with each passing year, their bond strengthened by the trials they had overcome and the dreams they had shared. They cherished their quiet moments together, their long walks on the beach, their intimate dinners under the stars, their shared laughter and whispered conversations. One evening, as they were sitting on their terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant hues of orange and purple, Bianca turned to Alessandro, her eyes filled with a profound sense of contentment. "Do you ever regret it, Alessandro?" she asked, her voice soft and tender. "Leaving the palazzo, leaving the power, leaving it all behind?" Alessandro smiled, his silver eyes reflecting the warmth of the setting sun. "Never, bella mia," he said. "My only regret is that we didn't do it sooner." He reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle and loving. "This is where I belong," he said. "With you. This is my true home, my true happiness." Bianca leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. She had found peace, she had found freedom, she had found a love that transcended the darkness of her past. They occasionally received visits from Lorenzo, who would update them on the family's progress and seek Alessandro's advice on important matters. Lorenzo had matured into a strong and respected leader, but he never forgot the debt he owed to Bianca and Alessandro, the sacrifices they had made, and the guidance they had provided. On one such visit, Lorenzo brought with him his young son, a bright and curious boy named Marco, in honor of the Don whose legacy had shaped their lives in so many ways. Bianca held the child in her arms, her heart filled with a sense of hope for the future, a future where the Bellini family would be known not for violence and fear, but for compassion and prosperity. As the years turned into decades, Bianca and Alessandro watched the world change around them, the old ways of the mafia fading into the past, replaced by a new generation of leaders, a new set of challenges, and a new set of opportunities. They lived a long and fulfilling life together, their love a beacon of hope and resilience in a world often shrouded in darkness. They had found their peace, their happiness, their new dawn. And as the sun finally set on their lives, they left behind a legacy of love, loyalty, and the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome even the most daunting of obstacles. Their story was a testament that even from ashes, diamonds could rise, that even in the darkest of worlds, love could bloom, and that even a mafia queen could find her happily ever after. The end.